Well, we have a couple of news items to talk about today, and I also want to talk about one team that's showing some concerning signs, but we'll get to that at the end. First of all, it was announced this morning that the Kitchener Rangers have signed COO Joe Birch and General Manager Mike McKenzie through to 2029. And I think this is great news for the Rangers organization. This is showing stability, and I think this is a step towards their bid towards the 2027 Memorial Cup, and that's the next time the Ontario Hockey League will host the tournament. And I did the interview with Mike Farwell a couple of months ago, the play-by-play voice of the Kitchener Rangers, and he made mention to it as well that this is a Rangers team that's looking to the future, and I think these are the right steps to take because for Joe Birch, he's been with the Kitchener Rangers for the last 4 seasons. He's credited with helping get this team through the pandemic, and he's also been noticed by quite a few people around the Canadian Hockey League. There were some rumblings that maybe he was being considered for the role of OHL commissioner because, of course, this is the last season for David Branch before he retires. So right now, with him signing through until 2029, you can take Birch's name out of the equation as a potential replacement for David Branch. And as for Mike McKenzie, he's been the general manager now since 2012. Time flies. It feels like just yesterday he was hired as the GM of the Kitchener Rangers, but he's done a pretty good job as well. This is a Kitchener team that's been competitive. Last year, maybe considered a bit of a disappointment. A lot of people picked Kitchener to be that top team in the Western Conference, but they fell short of those expectations, although it was a very entertaining playoff last year when the 8th seed swept the number 1 seed Windsor Spitfires. That's something we don't see, and we probably won't see again for a few more years at least. But for McKenzie, he's also showed that he can coach, he can be the GM. So this is a good signing, and I think Kitchener Ranger fans will be pretty happy to see that Mike McKenzie and Joe Birch will be sticking around until 2029. And then there's the question about UC Ahokas, the head coach. He has been sensational this year. You kind of have to give him credit for why the Rangers are exceeding expectations for this season. They were off to that hot start, getting wins, and right now slipped a little bit in the standings. They're sitting 4th right now in the West. So Ahokas, I'm sure the Rangers will look to try to extend him up to 2029, although I wouldn't be surprised if some National Hockey League teams look to Ahokas in the future as a potential candidate for a National Hockey League team. But still, I think the signings that were announced today, a good step for the Kitchener Rangers, as don't be surprised when they put in that bid in 2027 to try and be hosts of the Memorial Cup when it comes to the OHL. Now, the next item I'm only going to mention, I don't want to go into too much detail. It involves the Peterborough Petes. It was announced yesterday that a former Billet has been arrested and charged for having an inappropriate relationship with a player of the Petes. The incident allegedly happened last season. There's not a lot of specifics. The team's not going to comment on this, which makes sense. But still, it's something that's happened. It's going to be in the news. I know TSN already had an article about it. Also, the media in Peterborough, they're talking about the situation. So I just wanted to bring it up here because it's a news item. But at the same time, this is rare. There's so many Billet families across Ontario and even across Canada. It's a system that's really helpful for junior hockey teams and even other junior sports. If we didn't have Billet families, we wouldn't be able to have what we do right now. And, you know, these Billet families, they do take on a lot with supporting ththese young athletes and just to be there for them, to have that shelter, and also for those relationships, not these sort of relationships, but the more positive ones. So it's always, you always get one bad apple is the saying, but still the Peterborough Petes organization not commenting, and they'll want to put this past them. It's such a hard couple of weeks, the amount of investigations that have been going on. This is now the second time we've had a police investigation involving an OHL team. Of course, the last one being the Oshawa Generals with the Connor Lockhart situation. That's now been resolved. And then you've got the situation in Sault Ste. Marie with Tucker Tynan taking them to court. But still, these things happen. It just so strange when you get them in bunches. And hopefully this will be the last investigation of its kind that we'll have to talk about this season. And I wanted to end talking about the Sudbury Wolves. I was able to watch last night's game. I wanted to be there in person, but with the way the weather was, just not able to make that trip. But this is a Sudbury Wolves team that's showing some concerning signs. I know a lot of people like to point at the goaltending as maybe being an issue. Vondraus, of course, a Carolina Hurricanes prospect. He was in the game to start last night, but was pulled uh, in that first period, and Vandenberg took over. I don't know if it's necessarily just a goaltending problem. It seems as though this team is off. There's no questioning the high flying offense that this Sudbury Wolves team has. They can put goals in bunches. We saw that at the start of the game last night as they scored 3 goals on 16 shots in that first period. They put 16 shots on net. They do it with ease. Ben West, of course, had a fantastic game after the fact. He gave up those 3 goals in the first period and didn't look back. But for the Sudbury Wolves, you look at their last 5 games. I know there's the whole bounty situation that's in the background. Is that a distraction? Maybe. It did seem a little off. They didn't play such a physical game like we're used to seeing with the Sudbury Wolves last night. So maybe that was in their back of their minds playing the Barrie Colts last night. But in their last 5 games, they only have 2 wins. Those 2 wins against the Guelph Storm, that was a 4-1 victory on the road, and the other was a 3-2 win at home in overtime against the Peterborough Petes. So the wins coming against 2 teams that have been having a really tough go of late. And in that Peterborough game, they were down 2-0 after the first period, and they didn't pull off the comeback until late in the third period. So the offense has been sputtering a little bit, and they're just, it's kind of reminding me of what happened in 2014. If you're a Sudbury Wolves fan, you probably know what I'm talking about. That was the year they went in the OHL trade deadline. They picked up Radek Faksa from the Kitchener Rangers and then Trevor Carrick from the Mississauga Steelheads. It was an all-in year. The Sudbury Wolves had a great team. You had Frankie Palazzese in net. They also picked up Connor Crisp at the start of the season and Craig Dunnick from the Sarnia Sting. Nick Baptiste was there, Campagna, Pansell. They had a great group. But as the season went along past the OHL trade deadline, they fell out of first place in the division. And then they had some string of losses and ended up finishing 5th in the Eastern Conference that year and were knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, the Barrie Colts, in 5 games. So it just goes to show you don't want to have these losing streaks as you're approaching the postseason. And I'm sure for Sudbury Wolves fans, getting some flashbacks of that 2014 run. There's a lot of hype and excitement around that Sudbury Wolves team, and then it just deflated there going into the postseason. So I'm sure for the Sudbury Wolves, they have the talent, they have the creativity. I'm sure this is a team that can turn it around. They were missing 2 players last night due to injury, Evan Conyon and Zachary Giroux. Sounds like upper body injuries for both of those players. But if you can get those guys back, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Sudbury Wolves then pull off a 3-game winning streak in the coming weeks to turn things around before the postseason. But it is a little alarming right now. I don't think we should hit the panic button when it comes to the Sudbury Wolves team, but it was just something I noticed last night. The team just looked so off. Yeah, they were getting shots, but they weren't that threatening at times. And then you also had the spearing incident at the end of the hockey game. So there's another suspension, it seems like, that's going to be on the way with Coughlin. He was given that misconduct at the end of the game. So it's tough times right now in the Sudbury Wolves, and I think it might have to come down to Ken McKenzie and the coaching staff. Maybe they need to change the systems up a bit here. Change something. Find something to generate the spark, because whatever they're doing right now, it's not really working. You can't outscore your problems night in, night out. You're going to get burned, and we saw that happen last night against the Barrie Colts. That happened against Mississauga on Sunday. And if this is a team that's going to have a deep run, they got to get the wins, and they need to be playing like a full unit. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there, and maybe this is just a one-off. We'll have to wait and see. But anyways, would love to see your comments down below. Thank you for your support. We're actually almost at 100 subscribers, which I'm personally surprised by. I didn't know how this channel was going to grow or how people were going to interact, but thank you if you've subscribed so far. It means a lot, and if you've been tuning in without subscribing, that's okay too. It's great to be able to have the interactions and just to see the growth. But if you do like these videos, the interviews and whatnot, having these news items, feel free to hit subscribe. Help this channel continue to grow, and we'll see where we end up going next. You just never know the potential of this channel. So again, thank you very much for tuning in. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.